Yeah, fun. Um, and all right. Well, our 4-day tour updates. Anybody have any questions about the tours? Anything? Okay, very good. Very good. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight. And Larry comes as a longtime member of our roundtable. He is from Louisiana and he's been living in Chicago for many years. And you know, Larry's I think the only guy in America that has a Louisiana and Chicago accent now. So,
Whoa, I've been slipping now. It's very confusing.
So, but in all seriousness, Larry got a good sense of humor. Dr. Hewlett has an outstanding career in Civil War history. A native of Louisville, Kentucky, Dr. Hewlett received his BA in 1974 from the University of Kentucky, his MA and Ph.D. from Louisiana State University. Go Tigers! Got a pretty decent football team down there.
Yeah.
He was the manager of Port Hudson and Camp Moore, historic sites in Louisiana, and taught at Southeastern Louisiana University as a college professor. He was a tenured full professor, and he was smitten by true love and came to Chicago. So I guess you like the winters up here. Have you gotten used to that?
I do.
You do? Okay. Okay. In 1991, he was a recipient of Southeastern Louisiana University President's Award for Excellence in Research, the 1991 Charles Dufour Award, the 2011 Dr. Arthur Bergeron Award, and he was also our very own 2013 Nevins-Freeman Award winner. He is also past president of the Baton Rouge Civil War Roundtable. Larry's publications include Port Hudson, the Confederate Bastion on the Mississippi, and also Port Hudson, the most significant battlefield photographs of the Civil War, which recently came up. Without further ado, Dr. Larry Hewitt.
Well, it's been a long time since I talked without a mic, but I used to have to do it with 130 some students in the room. So I'll see if I can keep up here. Let me raise a hand in the back if I drift off. And since I can't get Bruce to promise, if I move out of the framework here as he sets it up, I'm terrible with Zooms. You know, I get away and sometimes if I got a mic here, I'll get away and they don't hear me or see me, and that's not a very good Zoom show. I want to thank all of you diehards for coming. Many of you have seen these slides before, and some version of the presentation you're going to get tonight, especially for Bruce here. Promise Bruce is going to learn something new tonight, and that takes a lot to teach Bruce something new. Now, I love Terry's still there. I love the musical chairs. You know, I've never seen two people go around like that before. So welcome all. A couple things as I let Bruce finish playing technical person. I got some books for you for sale. The Blushing Bride gets first choice. I don't know if you have one or not. Then you might pick the photo book. You might pick one on the Trans-Mississippi. There are 3 books there. They're all first edition, first printings. The 2 smaller ones came out for $45 and $55. They're only $10 tonight because I got what was left from the publisher. The $50 photograph book is only $35 if anybody's interested. With that, going to get off script here a couple of times. I was trained to read, and so your critique at a professional historical conference can critique what you're going to say and not what you get up there and say. You didn't get to read in advance. But anyway, I got my start speaking to Civil War roundtables. Isabel Wiley died unexpectedly, and they needed somebody desperately, and he was very popular and overbooked. And I got called up, and the only thing I could come up with, I just started Port Hudson the year before, and I was putting together photographs for the museum there. And so I started talking about Port Hudson, the most photographed battlefield in the Civil War. Did you ever make a mistake? I did. And I was called on it, I believe it was in Lyle at a Chicago symposium by Gary Edelman, who said, who's this guy that goes around talking about Port Hudson, the most photographed battlefield in the Civil War? So after we set the rules and discussed it, we concluded that Port Hudson was second to Brandy Station. And since then, I've learned both of those are far distant behind Chattanooga. There are way more photographs taken, outdoor photographs taken during the war was our rule. The photographer up on Lookout Mountain had it made a good business. That he 25-cent shots everywhere else in the country, he got $3 for it. Oh, so there's over 2,000 outdoor photographs taken during the war in Chattanooga. Now, this is my talk tonight. I say never judge a book by its cover, but let's get to the cover. Uh-oh. Well, does it go left and right or up and down or what? I know it was working before, but that doesn't do me any good.
On the image. Like that.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's, we got the second one? Good. Yeah, that's the second.
Oh, that's one thing. Yeah, because she's going up and down.
Because I'm messing it up. Okay, I'll go in.
Well, I'm not gonna say anything about women, but which one do I hit?
Neither.
Neither.
I'm gonna sit here and do it by.
Oh, good. That's good. Now you face me, so if I wander out of the screen, you can hold your hand up like you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, put the book out. Maybe, okay, go back one.
Oh, now you're getting difficult.
All right. Okay, this is the cover of the book. What I've seen the most significant battlefield photographs of the Civil War. So, like I said, I started off in 1980, I guess it was, talking about the most photographed battlefield in the Civil War. So I got screwed wrong by Gary Edelman. I accept my mistake. So I had to come up with a new title. And to get this book out took a long time. It used to cost a lot more money to publish photographs, and it cost a fortune to get the rights to reproduce some of them. Many of them appear for the first and only time in this book, and it will not be reprinted. So this will be out of print by the end of the year, I guess. Anyway, so I came up and I fought the publisher, University of Tennessee Press, for this title, the most significant battlefield photographs of the Civil War. How could it be? Well, many Civil War enthusiasts and professional historians alike dismissed the book out of hand because it wasn't possible. Those photographs didn't come from Port Hudson. And what concerned me the most was that some of them that I knew actually read it still didn't get it. At least half of them didn't get it, those that read it. So before publishing another volume of all these photographs, I wanted to come up with a new title. And I was leaning toward the birth of combat photography. So we go back and make mistakes. If you ever get it right and then convince yourself you were wrong, only to find out you were right to begin with? Happened to me. So I'm looking for the title. And we're going to get to the end. There's going to be my email address. All comments are welcome. Next slide. So, one of the problems I'm looking for is the definition of what constitutes a photograph being taken in combat or taken in action. Or are they the same? Is there a difference between them or not? And if you think it's ridiculous, I agree. Unfortunately, there is reasoning for this problem, which brings us to a person. I gave a speech in June in Marietta, Georgia, and a fellow came up after and commented about, well, one way to define combat is the combat infantry badge. What do you have to do to earn that? Because there are a lot of politicians over the years that claim they were there, when the bullets were flying and they were not. So we have the standard combat infantryman badge that is given to, and believe it or not, the U.S. Army doesn't have a definition of what constitutes combat precisely or across the board. The infantryman badge is for all infantrymen and special forces who perform, quote, duties while personally present and under fire. The combat action badge is for those who are not members of the infantry, special forces, or medical personnel for being, quote, present and actively engaging or being engaged by the enemy and performing satisfactorily in accordance with prescribed rules of engagement. Medical personnel have their own combat badge. For those who have performed their duties while under fire during active ground combat. Nothing definitive here. It's offered by the government. Now, how do you think that's crazy? We live in the age of the selfie. Everybody knows what a selfie is, right? Well, this is my first selfie. And it was taken by my niece, Diana. And according to a selfie, everybody that's in the selfie taken by a person, it's a selfie of them. I don't quite buy into that, but okay. So this is my first selfie, even though somebody else made it. All right, next slide. Now, officially, the first selfie was created, the term, I should go back. The term came out a year after the first cell phone with a camera. That's when the selfie was born. Selfie taken by somebody where the photographer is in the picture. That makes it a selfie. So officially, by the definition that the whole world believes, the first selfie was made in 1954 when the first camera was made with a timer on it. So that the camera person can set it all up, puts the timer, and run and get in the picture. This selfie was taken by my niece Emily, second from the left. By the definition, it's everybody's selfie. Even the dogs, I think. To me, this is over the top, but this is the definition of a selfie. Okay, now we remember what a selfie is now. It's where the photographer appears in the image. What about if the photographer is in front of the mirror and takes a shot? Isn't that a selfie? Was the first selfie taken before any of us were born? I think the definition is a little shaky, which how that the selfie definition can't be 100%. How can you get into action in combat? Now, I recently reviewed a manuscript by a fellow who is on Civil War photographs. I call him Professor X. If you heard me talk about Professor X before, I rank him a little higher now than I did then because he took all my criticisms and maybe his book will be published. But he claims, quote, the most valuable battlefield photographs to emerge from the Civil War are those that were captured soon after the fighting stopped and include details of landscape where the fighting occurred. For complete authenticity, they cannot include subjects who are opposing. Now, Professor X went on to declare, quote, photographs of actual battle actions don't exist for the Civil War. Now, significance didn't matter to Professor X. Going back to what I said about Port Hudson having the most significant photographs. Professor X was interested in proving what was the most popular Civil War photographs. And he based his popularity on the one that was most published over the years. And he managed to come up with a data set where of his top 25 most popular photographs, 14 of them included dead soldiers, including 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Not number 1. Go ahead. Number 1 was 3 Confederates captured at Gettysburg. No dead bodies. And watch carefully, they're posing. So they're on the battlefield, but they pose. With this, it shouldn't count, but it's number 1. Now, the camera has been around throughout our lives. And the concept of photography originated in the 5th century BC in China. Figuring out the optics of the camera was child's play compared to creating a negative that you could put the image on. It was not until the 19th century that the two were combined and the first commercial camera was produced. Now, initially, 1 negative meant 1 print because the negative was actually the print, the daguerreotypes, the amuletotypes, etc. $10. Now, this image was taken during the Mexican War. It's Major General Johnny Wool. He's on duty, and he's in Mexico, but there's no threat at the time from enemy troops. Now, was this taken in action? Would it have been taken in action if the horse kicked the dog or the dog hit a soldier? Who knows? Because, like I said, the definitions aren't out there. Now, the Colonial process came along to replace where 1 negative made 1 print that is salvageable, and it replaced the daguerreotype in the 1850s. Now, this technological advance required putting a piece of paper on a glass negative, but the paper became the print, and you could slap on as many as you wanted to. You wore out the negative. So, baseball-size photographs, known as cartes-de-visite, became very popular. And photographs were taken, the first battlefield photographs that are known, were taken during the Crimean War after the fighting was over. But this was special extra like this because nobody's posing and it's on the battlefield after the battle. Now, by the time of the Civil War centennial, most Civil War historians believe there must have been a photograph taken in action during the Civil War. And they finally concluded it was this one. And initially, this was supposed to be Union soldiers waiting for the order to advance during the Battle of the Crater. This would have been the 3rd or 4th wave. So to find out, the photograph was actually taken in Fredericksburg, May 3rd, 1863. And it was taken during a truce. Well, it doesn't work anyway. All right, now, so it's taken during a truce. Well, are they in action because they're on duty on the battlefield in front of the enemy, or is it not even in action? And it's not in combat if nobody's shooting at them. Again, definition's kind of still up in the air. Now, what if the subjects in the photograph could have been fired upon? And I wish Roger Vaughn was here to see this, because when he heard me give the presentation in Salt Creek last year, he didn't think any of my photographs should have seen the night qualified as taken in action. But afterwards, I asked him about photographing the light bulb being off. Roger. This is General Eisenhower, the day before D-Day. He's visiting some of the airborne troops in the field. Now, they're in England. They're not under enemy fire unless you count German rockets that come in at any time. And he's posing for the camera. But he's on active duty, combat zone. Is it in action? Is it combat? Or is it neither? Now, after historians dismissed the photograph taken at Fredericksburg, it was concluded that there couldn't be a Civil War photograph taken in action because of the technology available at the time. It required, you've all seen the little stands where you go in from the portrait, they hold your head still because you've got to leave the lens cap off for so many seconds, and if you move, it's blurred. Well, one reason for that was the less light you had, the longer you had to hold still. And in the studio, you had less light. Outside, in the sunlight, you might get away with 1 second. But still, if you move, the image was blurred. So, if a soldier couldn't move, he couldn't shoot. Therefore, he couldn't be in combat. So, no photograph of soldiers in combat during the Civil War could have been taken. Kind of sounds logical. Oh, that's you. Sailors, however, this is good. Sailors, however, could have their photograph taken in combat, in action during the Civil War. This is a monitor attack. 3 little U.S. monitors out there firing on Fort Sumter. Well, they're actually firing on Fort Moultrie, but the shots taken from Fort Sumter. Other monitors are firing at Fort Sumter. So this is 1 of 2 photographs. Guy takes it. Shell hits the parapet where his camera is. All true story. He moves the camera over and he takes another shot. Looks almost like the stereoscopic. And because the ships are so far, their ships are moving, but they're so far away, they don't appear to have moved between the shots. And they don't appear to be moving, So it's like, okay, even though you're in action, they're so far away that they're not moving, so they're not blurred from that. Could be real combat. At the same time, 2 photographs were taken by another photographer, northerner, down on Folly Island in the south of the monitors. He was safely out of range and he couldn't see the Confederate works that were being bombarded, but he could photograph the monitors. There are at least 4 shots taken of this monitor attack, which I think you've got to say was taken in combat. This photograph, the first Army commander, maybe anywhere in the world, that had a photographer on his payroll was George B. McClellan. It was discovered that the quickest way to reproduce a map for the troops was to photograph one and keep printing. McClellan maybe thought of it because he was an observer in the Crimean War or whatever, but anyway, he was the first to hire a photographer for the government, and that's what they did. And they traveled with the Army, they ate Army rations, and they're, unlike all the civilian photographers who were mentioned in the quiz who arrived on the battlefield afterwards. Now, there's some that say Brady was there and he skedaddled and then went back, whatever. McClellan, the Army photographers were there. They were there on the battlefield before the battle started, when the fighting was going on, and afterwards. This was the case at Antietam, where this photograph was taken on September the 18th while Lee's army is waiting for McClellan to renew the attack if he doesn't. Yet, of all, and the Union Army commanders got it picked up on this quick. All the Union armies in the West did it, not Banks in the Department of Gulf. But soon all the Union Army commanders in the North had their own photography. Yet, of all these Army photographers who are on all these battlefields, not one of them took a photograph of soldiers in combat. Why? Now, I've yet to find a photograph of William D. McPherson or A.J. Oliver. One thing I learned from Professor X is like the size of the image describes the importance of the person involved. My first rule of life, there are no accidents. So what made McPherson and Oliver unique among Civil War photographers. Now, all that is known about A.J. Oliver is that he started to work with McPherson in January of 1863. I'm sorry, in January of 1863. And in April of 1865, he got his draft notice. And he disappeared. Never to be seen or heard from again. All that's known about it. William D. McPherson was more prominent. He was born in Boston in 1833, opened his first photographic studio in 1855. By 1860, he was producing, among other things, quote, life-size photographs superior to anything of the kind in the country. Life-size. And no, his negative wasn't like 18 square feet. He figured out how to take the little negative and enlarge print. As far as I know, the first person that ever did it. But he did it. And was doing it before the war. McPherson decided he wanted to do something to help the war effort. And in 1862, he organized a company. It was said, quote, he was as good with a rifle as a camera. He got 70 volunteers, took them to the front, and he became Company G's 2nd U.S. sharpshooter. The regiment, some of this is for the Milwaukee people. They didn't hear this last night. The 2nd U.S. sharpshooters, you never know it now, served in the 1st Iron Brigade. They got shot up at 2nd Manassas when the 1st Iron Brigade earned their reputation. Then they got shot up a little bit at South Baton. And what was left of them fought at Antietam, Miller's Cornfield, on September the 17th, where they lost over 25% of those still there. So desperately in need of recruits and officers, they were transferred to the rear and allowed to reorganize. A few weeks later, McPherson submitted his resignation and he received his discharge October 31st, 1862. He then traveled by sea with Nathaniel P. Banks' troops heading down to New Orleans. And McPherson then accompanied the Union forces from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, which they reoccupied on December 17th, 1862. By the end of the year, McPherson had opened a studio in a tent, and he got most of the Union business. There were thousands of Union soldiers stationed there at the time. The Southern civilians, however, continued to do business with the already established gallery of Andrew J. Lytle, often portrayed as a Confederate spy, and he was the preeminent Civil War or Southern photographer at the time. Now, money was already tight for both studios, and it got tighter now that there was a competition. So in March, Lytle started producing fake stereoscopics. He took the picture, made 2 prints of the same negative, put them on side by side, and was selling his stereoscopics. So McPherson responded by ordering a stereoscopic camera so he could make real stereoscopics. But before the camera arrived, the Union Army departed Baton Rouge for southwestern Louisiana and the first Bayou test campaign. So McPherson's cash flow that was already suffering plummeted faster than Northern morale for the support of the war at that time, April of 1863. Now, to support the war effort and make some money, McPherson took 3 images of an escaped slave named Gordon. Thousands of copies of these 3 images were made and reproduced in the North, where he became known as Whipped Peter. McPherson didn't make much money off of him. Profits went to the counterfeiters in the north, especially Matthew Brady. In May of 1863, most of the Federals remaining at Baton Rouge marched north to participate in an attack on Port Hudson, while Major General Banks was breaking down the larger portion of his army down the Red River to advance on Port Hudson from the north. 5th Division came up from New Orleans, and the 5 of them attacked on May the 27th, and the attack failed. Business is not picking up in Baton Rouge for McPherson, but he took heart when he heard that Banks was planning another attack. Banks' plan was well known to everyone. Banks was going to bombard Port Hudson on June the 13th and then demand Port Hudson surrender. And if the commander, maybe General Franklin Gardner, refused, then Banks would resume the bombardment, and he already had the entire army ready to attack the next morning before dawn. Well, Gardner refused, and so Banks was going to attack. Now, McPherson saw a chance to make money here. He's seen the photographs of the dead soldiers taken in Antietam. Maybe he saw Sully Fredericks, but he never saw it was in Antietam. So he is going to go to Port Hudson. He's either going to be there for the surrender, or he's going to be there after the attack that captures the place. That he's going to be there. Now, little aside here, the photographs you see tonight consist of cartes-de-visite or CDVs, stereoscopics, some large format prints that varied in size, and what I call composites. This is a composite. And this was taken after the Confederate surrender. It was taken at Port Hudson. And it is made from 3 cartes-de-visites that were made from the same negative. And there's one in the lower right, one off to the left there, you see a little, and then one at the top. And the significance, I think this one to show, had to fight the publisher to put in a picture like that, not pop. There's some other ones that had the little corners popped off in the book. But the reason is, the first of these 3 images that I found, and the one that was most widely published, printed, was the bottom right. And the bottom right did not show any of the Mississippi River, which is what's over in the upper left background. So I knew it was taken at Port Hudson, but I didn't know where. But when you tie it into the other ones, especially the one at the top, it's taken at the Citadel, the extreme southern end of the Confederate line. So think about it like this. If you imagine your glass negative is the size of the white screen, and you're going to put your piece of paper on it and make a print, that piece of paper is only going to cover 40% of the negative. So you can slap a lot of pieces of paper on there where they don't even overlap at all. But you can also, if you find enough of them, put them together. And with one exception, you can't cheat, because the negatives were so precise, the images are so clear, you can't like overlap them. You can doctor them, you can do your little Photoshop stuff, but if you play by the rules, to combine them, they have to have been made from the same negative originally. Now, so anticipation of Banks' victory one way or the other, whether by the Confederate surrender or the attack and capture, McPherson decides that he's going to get to the battlefield. And on June 13th, he and Oliver load up the wagon, including the just newly arrived stereoscopic camera and their Kent studio, and they head north. After traveling 20 miles, the duo reached Young's plantation on June 14th. The firing they heard 3 miles away meant that Gardner didn't surrender on the 13th, and the attack had not been successful. It was still going on. So the photographer stopped, took one image. There's soldiers there guarding it. Banks wasn't there because Banks was closer to the front at the time. And they covered and moved on. They went next to Young's. Let's see. I don't know how that. Yeah, well, it's my misprint. I can't think of the name. I went to another plantation where Banks had his headquarters from May 29th. Let's see, I'm sorry. From May, let's see. I really messed up. Got a whole line gone. No, I'm sorry. No, I got it. Here we go. So this is Young's plantation. Next slide. That's where all right. So then he went to the next place, which was Riley's plantation, where Banks had his headquarters at the beginning of the struggle for Port Hudson for 3 days. And they took one shot. Here, there are no Union troops around. The front is a mile, 2 miles, or 2 miles to the southwest, and the rear is half a mile to the north and northeast, which is the Bayou Sierra Road, which is the Union rear. So from there, they went to the headquarters of Major General Pierre Grover. Grover commanded Banks's right wing. His headquarters is about a mile from the front. He's there on June 15th, and he takes a photograph of Grover's headquarters. This is one. Several of the pictures that, in the book in particular have stereoscopic, but I wanted this as an example of a stereoscopic. And I guess if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Notice this little. No, I'm sorry. I guess I got a point with the other image. Anyway, notice the little flaw here in the image. Very important. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Same flaw. Same flaw. This is a large format print. Now, if you're going to make a print of this and you're going to blow it up to somebody, why would you pick the one with the flaw in the negative? Well, it's because the right side of the stereoscopic showed more of the scene to the right. And off to the right was one of Grover's division commanders, William White. Oh, I'm sorry, Wetzel. And Wetzel wanted the enlargement that showed him at Grover's headquarters. So he took the side with the flaw and had the enlargement made. Then he hired McPherson and Oliver to go to his headquarters, which was farther to the right or west and closer to the front, and take a photograph of his headquarters. Beyond the cannonballs and the musket balls were coming over the crest of this ridge, and they dug in on the back for safety. But cannonball could have exploded here, used time in that way. All right. Okay. So from there, they leave Wetzel's headquarters and they visit Battery Number 7, where Captain Edward McLaughlin's Company G, 1st Indiana Heavy Artillery was stationed, where they manned 2 30-pound Parrots. Now notice both of the guns are pointed to the left. Okay. Oh, and I should have said, notice the cannonball in the last one. That's all right. Cannonball on the last image is on top of the stump. Now, the cannon on the right is still pointed to the left, but the one on the left has been fired. And it's now pointing like straight ahead from the camera. And somebody moved the large cannonball off the stuff and down to the ground. So, okay, soldiers posed for both shots, but the cannon was fired. One of the cannons were fired in between the shots. So does this count as being, and the enemy, I'm sure, was shooting back. Does it count as being taken in combat? Now from there, they went on, battery 8. This battery 8 contained 10 cannon. It wraps around from the far distance along the tree line there as it's moving back to the center. But at this end was battery A, 5th. Battery, Edmund C. Bainbridge's Company A, 5th U.S. Artillery. These are regulars, U.S. Army regulars. And they're taking a break and posing for the camera. Next one. Most of the time, McPherson and Oliver would take one with the regular camera lens, which was a larger, and then the stereoscopic camera with two smaller images. So in between taking these shots, this appears. Many of the regulars have gone away. They managed to get one through here. It looks kind of like a sabot with a shell attached to it. Actually, it's a 3.5 gallon whiskey barrel for a bottle. Kind you see with a wicker wrap around it. The officer who wanted the photograph made was McPherson and Oliver was there to make a living. Had to offer some inducement, you know, when you sit in the shade, why stand out here in the sun? Now, next slide. And, oh, go back. No, something went wrong here. This one, thank you. Okay, this is to me, one of the three most significant photographs taken at Port Hudson. This was called the Navy battery, or Marine battery. It's 4 13-inch Dahlgren cannon taken off the USS Richmond. And they were brought into position opposite the center of the Confederate line, and literally to blast through the Confederate fortifications. Now, it's like, we're going to come to two other important pictures, but this one enabled me to prove these 4 cannon were only there together between June 9th and June 18th. So all the photographs you're going to see going forward that people said McPherson and Oliver took after the siege was over, they were taken during the siege. And this one had to be taken in the middle of the siege because that's the only time these 4 guns were there. So first thing I had to prove was that they were there before the siege ended, and then, well, when did they get there? All right. So after taking the naval battery, they travel off to the left or south. This is battery number 21. Grimsley's another Indiana heavy artillery battery. They took this one between June 19th and June 22nd because this battery would later be destroyed during the siege and replaced with another one in different troops. It would be enlarged from 2 to 4 guns, and it would be different units stationed there. So this one had to be taken again, June 19th to the 22nd. The June 9th is still the earliest, but I'm saying that they back to the battlefield on the 16th or 15th counting Golden State quarters or the 14th if you count Banks. Now, if you talk about the photograph in 1,000 words, this one, the words are on the back. Now I know why I copied the words down. It's covered up here in the Zoom. The words are more important. Headquarters left wing camp before Port Hudson, Louisiana, June 26, 1863. 4:30 p.m. to Old Missy with love. McPherson and Oliver set up a 2-tent studio behind the Union left, and we make taking portrait shots to make money. So it's the back. They were at the time. It's more important than the guy on the front. Working their way back to the north, they stopped at Federal Battery number 11, nicknamed the Black Horse Battery, Captain Albert Max, 18th New York Battery, 6 20-pound parrots. All 6 of the cannon remained there between June 14th and June 29th. On the night of June 29th, one was removed. All six are in this print, so it has to be taken during the siege. All evidence indicates that this was the first photograph ever taken in the park. There are several copies in existence. One was purchased by the Library of Congress, and they all have the caption, "Fine view of Port Hudson taken at midnight." Now, I used to do this in postal fortifications around the South. If you leave the lens open, you can take a picture in the dark. The bigger problem is if you don't have the tripod and you're holding it, you got to hold it steady for as long as the lens is open. If you can shoot photographs in the dark, as long as the lens stays open long enough to allow enough light to enter. And again, there's some fellow up in Maryland who maybe shot one sometime in 63 or 64. It is town, but this one's legit and maybe the first photograph ever taken outside in the dark. This was taken either on the way down or back from the Union left. Can't say. There's another view. This is either taken the day before at noon or the day after. They took the one at midnight. Now, and they managed. This one captured all six guns. Now, to fire, these guns are all ready to go. Everybody's in position. All they got to do is drop the mantlets or in these cases, wall had screens in front that are blocking the view of Confederate sharpshooters. Drop the screen, roll the cannon forward, and fire. This is the rear of Captain Richard Duryea's Battery F, 1st U.S. Artillery. And it contains 6 12-pounders and 1 20-pounder carrot. This is McPherson's masterpiece. This is called a combination print. Because somebody proves otherwise, it's the first one that was ever made. Unlike my composites, where I put together prints that were making the same negative, this print was made from 2 different negatives. Technology at the time did not allow the photographer to take pictures of clouds. And this did not reproduce well here, but McPherson did it by taking the ground shot at midnight, getting the sunrise in the sky with the clouds somewhere else later on, and printing them together on the same piece of paper. Composition printing. Now, next slide. So the proof of this is the original taken at night, shows the dull sky and no clouds, no sunrise. And there's also one, something else McPherson did. You can take the same negative and make it daylight. Now, this one, he also did time-lapse photography. So if we'll go back to the two back. No, one more. Okay. So this is the one he put together. These are Union soldiers, either making coffee at midnight or cooking breakfast before dawn, whatever. Supposedly it's dawn, it's breaking, but it's Union. You can see that there are Union soldiers in the trench. And this is the back of the Union battery, not the front. All reinforced cotton bales. And the 2 little poles up there are to indicate the artillery behind them, not to shoot them. When they're shooting over at the Confederates, shoot around these 2 trees. But so there were, misfires and people didn't follow the rules, and so they fortified their back better than the front, probably. And this was the approach set to it. So they got their fire going. This is where they're making coffee and cooking food. Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead. So go back one then. Okay. All right, thank you. So this photograph appeared in a book a few years ago, and they claimed that the photographer caught a Confederate shell exploding in the Union Trench. It wasn't. But again, it goes back to talk about how McPherson, if you can make the prints darker or lighter by how long you leave them against the negative. So he could take the shot at night with its dark and use it printing at a different time and make it look like daylight. Next one. Now again, he did usually stopped and took a regular shot with a large glass negative, and then the stereo. This is the stereoscopic camera. The tripod. He did this at 2 other places after the siege, but the tripod stays in the same place. It just takes the stereoscopic off, or in this case, he took the other camera off, put the stereoscopic on, and shot the same spot at a different time, different camera, the same location. I call it time-lapse photography. Okay. Now, I saw this photograph early on. It's probably about somewhere between 50 and 60 of the ones I discovered. When I saw it, I said, this had to be taken to combat. There are Union sharpshooters up here shooting down in the Confederate lines to crease that. And the photographer's way back, down in the ditch. Now, there's no, if the battle wasn't going on, why not get up close? They're way back here. Because they could have changed their lens to even zoom in closer. This is a close-up of that center section. The sharpshooters are up here with the hogsheads of molasses filled with dirt. And as the barrels curve, they got a little slot to shoot through and a log with sandbags over the top. Now here's my hero. God bless the Army for their paperwork. This is Banks' chief engineer. All three was every night he had to make a report on what his engineer troops did that day. And he documents how long it took and how much was done each day on this trench. It's called Trench Cavalier. And because of that, this photograph, it's known that the sharpshooters started on July the 4th, but because of the level of instruction and the stairs and all, this photograph was taken on the morning of July 6th or July 7th. Definitely taken in combat. And I should point out one reason for that was the sharpshooters didn't stop the post for the cannon. It's like the artillery did, they kept shooting. Okay, now the next 4 images are all it was taken a new federal battery position number 9. And again, it's another company of the first and the heavy artillery. Originally, this battery contained 2 12-pound heavy brass hogsheads, but there's only one there. And this photograph is one of the most reproduced ones taken in Port Hudson. They call it the cotton barrel battery, because that's cotton that has been blasted from barrels that have been blasted apart by Confederate fire. So on July 7th, word reached Port Hudson that Vicksburg had surrendered. And next day, Gardner asked him, is this legit? And basically, yes, it was. And there was enough people that trusted each other on both sides to confirm it, that they started negotiating the surrender of the garrison, because there was no reason to fight on at Port Hudson if Vicksburg followed. So on July, it starts in the morning of July the 8th, and they go for several hours working out the terms. First, one of these cannons was removed that morning of July the 8th. So by the time the photographers got there, one was already gone, but the other one was still there and had the troops there. And so they posed for this shot. And they posed for actually 4 different shots, which is easy to do now because they're not shooting. So, next one. Slightly different angle. Another one. Okay. You see the guy, it almost looks like this guy's photoshopped here. Doesn't look like so. Nobody's there. But then there's another one that's where he's there, and it's a slightly different angle. It was a stereoscopic shot, and you can tell it's the same guy, same spot, but the space between these two soldiers' heads, there's a space between them in the previous one and not in this one. So it's stereoscopic. Now, the interesting thing is, this one was made from a cartes-de-visite. The last one was made from a large format print, but the negatives were the two halves of a stereoscopic. The stereoscopic has never been found. This is my third favorite Port Hudson photograph. And I found this one. If they're there for the surrender on the morning of July the 9th, and the photographers back there before surrender. So then it became a process of figuring out when did they arrive. This is the only photograph taken during the war of an army surrendering. And it's the morning of July 9th, 1863. And by then, McPherson and Oliver had achieved the dream. They were on the Army payroll. They were on the Army payroll. But again, it proves they were there before the surrender. All those other shots were in different cannon and the position they were taken during the siege. Now, why did McPherson and Oliver become the first civilian photographers to arrive on a battlefield before the fighting ended? In their case, weeks before the fighting ended. Money. Money. Their need to make money led them to Port Hudson. They weren't going to be there. They thought they'd be either photographing the surrender or photographing the corpses from the attack, successful Union attack on Union 14, neither of which came about. The other thing that drove them besides money that they needed was luck. Their good luck, but Banks' is bad luck. They're there. There's nothing to go back to Baton Rouge for. And the siege is still going on, so they stay. And here's their customers. So they hustle their way around and make what money they can. They're going to stay on the Army payroll. And they're going to accompany Banks' army through the Red River. And then they're going to accompany the Army of the Gulf, not under Banks anymore, to Mobile, until the end of the war. So allow me to recap. Remember that subtitle. So we have the photographers. They can make enlargements. As far as I know, the first people who could. Usually when you got an enlargement, everybody else, you shot a bigger negative of the original, and then you made a print off the bigger negative. He didn't make them off the original negatives. They shot a photograph in the dark. They used time-lapse photography. They shot troops in combat, in action, shooting at the enemy, and they got the only photograph of a Confederate or any army surrendering in the Civil War. How could these images not be the most significant battlefield photographs of the Civil War? Matthew, who? William D. McPherson was the greatest photographer of the Civil War. I mean, that's it. You know, somebody and again, it comes back. There were all these other photographers here. But if you're on the Army payroll, man, you're not getting paid to get out there in the fighting and shoot pictures of the troops. You're getting paid. You can just sit back there behind the lines, and they did. McPherson and Oliver just happened to be the only civilian employees who made it to a battlefield while the battle was still going on in the entire Civil War. That's what the dog is. And McPherson was the great fighter. I go back to the combination print By 1869, most professional photographers in the United States knew how to do a combination. Very few of them ever attempted. McPherson was dead in 1867. So I think his record's going to stand the test of time. And I think it will, you know, people can go out and look, but it's like, I think that's going to stand as the first photograph taken in combat anywhere in the world. One more. We've done it. I'm going to say thank you. Welcome any questions. My email address, launch.hewitt@gmail.com. All comments, questions, criticism, etc. as well. Because this is an ongoing thing. It changes every time. Again, like I said, I mentioned Roger Bond, the fellow that, another fellow down at Marietta, maybe time, said, he was a World War II, or I'm sorry, Vietnam War photographer. He appreciated me saying they did it for the money, which apparently he encountered a lot of freelance journalists in Vietnam. And we were not only going to pay, they were there for the money. You know, he was like, and this is in Mariota's first time in people, he said, "Would you believe that? I never said that before. Birds, they did it for the money." I thank you, and I thank you all. So many good friends and all, and looking to see this before, for coming out and questions. Yes, sir. Yep. How did they become number one?
No, I thought that 1 through 5. It's 1 through 5.
How did that?
No, your favorite.
Oh, my favorite. Oh.
I think most important after number 1.
Well, I think there are not many people that attempt to do this about ranking photographs, and I've got some. I tell some stories in the book about, you know, it's not like baseball cards, and even baseball cards, people would organize them. You know, you do it by team or by player position, or rookie cards, or all kinds of things. With Civil War photographs, I think you have to take it. There's only the one that's definitely taken in combat to me would have to be the most significant Civil War photograph, and I might would put the Confederate army surrendering behind that, and then from there I would go to someplace else. I might pick one of the naval shots at Charleston Harbor.
So that, so the follow-up is the famous story the kind of story that what was dead on the battlefield of the Union.
Yep.
Those, now these are mine, not yours. Those probably the time in your estimation photographs that we can see.
I'll give you another example of what I would rank third, and Professor X will kind of, he alluded to it in a footnote. Something else that I would say, you can go to Gettysburg. Has everybody been to Gettysburg? All right, you go to Gettysburg, you look at the photographs. Gosh, it looks almost like it did then. You go to Port Hudson, and Mississippi River washed away a lot of it. There are none of the river batteries left. The Citadel is all gone. Bailey's Battery, the big Union Battery opposite the Citadel on the south side, is now a paper mill plant. So it's like, I would rank a photograph of, and this is the same as true for a lot of shots of Atlanta. But if you can't go see it the way it was, and in Port Hudson, a lot of it doesn't even exist now because it's eroded away by the Mississippi. I would rank that. The photograph of something that you can't see now is more important than one of a place you can see. Now, as for the bodies, there's a couple of things, and again, I cover a lot about a whole lot. The book was written 3 times, a whole lot more about Civil War photography. But one of the things that makes a difference about popularity and publication is the cost. That book cost me thousands of dollars to get the rights to reproduce some of those photographs, or that I had to pay to buy the photographs to get to reproduce them. The 25 you saw of Professor X, 24 from the Library of Congress or the National Archives. They're free. And after they're published now, they're in the public domain because of the date they were created. So it's like the first time, and that counts on the internet. So the reproduction part of it makes a big difference. That's one reason the most common photographs you see today are from Miller's Photographic History in 1911. 10 volumes, they were not copyrighted. So if you're going to pick out photographs for a book today, you're going to pick out the ones you can reproduce for free. And that narrows it down. There was one in Professor X's that he got from the Getty collection, and I don't know why. But like I said, there's a photograph that I would have put in here. They wanted $300 to use it for one print, not electric, not no digital, no foreign language. I mean, one time print. If you reprinted the book, even just in English, just like that, you got to pay it again. And in my case, and I've had friends that got caught like this, they paid the first time, particularly in a textbook. And when they come around to that place again and let them do it for $50, they, oh no, it's going to cost you $500 now, and they replaced it with something else because they could do that. In my book, you got to put in the ones that you got to put in. You can't like ship the, there's a dead body at Port Hudson. I can't ship one from Antigua. Other questions? Yes.
Banks, the politicians, as well as the general, did they ever try and do a picture of General Banks?
They got a picture of him, but they took it in New Orleans. They also did not. I would have thought they would have got one fair, but they got one of a lot of the naval officers. But something else about McPherson and Oliver, so they go off with the Army, and they kind of deal with another photographer in New Orleans to sell their prints while they're off with the Army. So they're not in New Orleans taking photographs while all Confederate prisoners go through. They're absent with the Army, kind of thing, because there are a lot of wonderful shots of Confederate officers captured at Port Hudson that were then in prison in New Orleans who got their photographs taken, but they were not by McPherson and Oliver. But that's the other thing when ranking up what's the most significant. You got that's one, and that's a great question, because there are two things that are missing from the Port Hudson photographs. I mean, of all of the photographs you see in the book, there are no famous individuals. I mean, like Farragut would have been the most famous, followed by Banks. Gardner, sitting on the horse in the line in front of his army at the surrender, would be the most famous person that was photographed by McPherson Oliver at Port Hudson. And and there are no dead bodies. Now, interesting, they could have, and there's one picture that made it into the top 25 of Professor X. There's one, at Antietam, they photographed dead Yankees as well. And at Fredericksburg, they photographed, there's one shot, but it's Battle of Fredericksburg, not the second one with the sunken road and all the Confederates. But there was one taken at the Battle of Fredericksburg in December of '62 of dead Union soldiers. They didn't sell as well. So they quit making it. And so McPherson, when there's a truce, so the four naval guns that shot was taken on June the 17th during a truce. So the battle was on June the 14th, the second major assault. Banks waited until June the 17th to get a truce to remove the wounded and bury the dead. There was one wounded guy still left after 3 days of outing in the Louisiana sun. Everybody, the rest of them died, but that allowed the camera to stand out there to the side of the breastwork and shoot down the line of those big naval guns. And there was one guy in each gun in each of the different crew positions. So I mean, that one was all very staged. But on that day, McPherson and Oliver had the opportunity to go out and shoot photographs of dead Union corpses because they littered the field, and they didn't. But if so if whatever criteria you use for what's the most significant photograph, that everything you can think of was at Port Hudson. The black troops, the Navy was short, a whole shebang, everything except the famous person and corpses. Other questions? Well, again, books are 10 and 35, and the blushing bride gets her choice first. Thank you, guys. This is a treat. I've had some nieces and nephews and stuff, but I've never had a book. Well, no, I didn't speak. I was going to say Ray Radovich got married there. On a tour, but I didn't speak, so this is a first.